Do you think that you know who Aquaman is? Did Batman used to run around sending criminals to the grave? Stick around and find out, because today on Top 10 Nerd, we're talking DC Comics retcons. And coming up first today, most DC fans recognize the hero known as the Spectre as one of the most powerful beings in the comic book universe. As a personification of God's spirit of vengeance, Spectre was an ancient force of pure justice, and he is so astronomical in his scope that he requires a human host in order to even be able to comprehend our human nature. One of the first of these hosts was Jim Corrigan, who was resurrected after his passing in order to become the host for the Spectre. But what may surprise some people to find out is that originally, during the Golden Age, Jim and the Spectre were actually just simply the same guy, with Jim just being a detective who would dress up as the Spectre and had some pretty cool ghost-like powers. The retcon here came when DC decided to split the two into two different entities entirely, making the Spectre one of the most powerful beings to exist in their comics. Now, during the first part of this list, we talked about how during the New 52 reboot, DC had altered the Justice League's starting lineup, replacing Martian Manhunter with the Earthbound hero Cyborg. Now, when Cyborg first showed up on the scene, he was a star football player who got extremely injured, which led to his scientist father to merge his body with advanced technology to create the technological hero who then debuted as a member of the Teen Titans. Well, alongside his new debut as a founding member of the Justice League, his origin was also slightly tweaked to have it so that the advanced technology that he was merged with was now a mother box from Darkseid's world of Apocalypse. This was a huge boost up in his actual power, giving him a huge list of new abilities and making him much more significant in the conflict with Darkseid, who was the one who brought together this team of powerful justice-inclined heroes. And it became the new favorite origin as well, even being the origin shown in Zack Snyder's Justice League live-action movie. But moving on from that, anytime a new Batman movie is set to come out, one of the biggest questions anyone has is who is going to be playing Alfred Pennyworth. Alfred Pennyworth is the key member of the Bat family. Batman may be the Bat family namesake, sure, whatever, but Alfred is the sticky glue that holds them all together. He's a father figure, a mentor, a helping hand, and a dear trusted friend who has been in Bruce Wayne's life from the time Master Wayne was born. Well, what if I told you that actually, no, that was not always true. Back in Batman number 16 from 1943 is when the character of Alfred actually showed up on the doorstep of Bruce Wayne for the first time. Not as a childhood butler of the character, but as a disheveled and disgraced valet who had come to serve Bruce as part of Bruce's father's dying wish. Alfred was a completely new hire for Bruce Wayne. This eventually got retconned to make it so that Alfred had always been with the Wayne family from way back in the day, and I think all of us are very happy that that change stuck around. But sticking with Batman here for a sec, one of the key defining attributes of the Caped Crusader is his no-killing policy. Batman refuses to take a life, even famously repeatedly letting the Joker live despite all of the horrible crimes that he continues to commit, even against Batman's own Bat family. Batman just kinda has to believe that these criminals can be rehabilitated. So it's always a shock to fans of the character when they take a look at his earliest comics and see the Dark Knight wielding a 9mm, taking pot shots at criminals left, right, and center. That's right, the Batman, alongside almost all the other Golden Age heroes, had quite the itchy trigger finger. Now, admittedly, this was before the end of World War II, and once that conflict ended, comic books saw a big old conservative crackdown that eliminated Batman's affection for bullets and turned him into the guy who drawed the line at just beating criminals to the very brink of death, but not actually ending their lives, just severely maiming them. But moving on from Batman to another Justice Leaguer, the Flash is one character that I think people don't actually realize had an incredibly tragic life. Like, a lot of stuff has gone wrong for him, with one of the biggest being the passing of his own mother, which was then blamed on his father, who didn't actually do it. For a while, Barry Allen had been wiped out, but actually transported into the Speed Force. So when he returned in Final Crisis and Flash Rebirth, he had a big huge face-off with Eobard Thawne, his most iconic villain, the Reverse Flash. But DC brought a massive change to Eobard's character when they made it so that this time-traveling villain was actually the one to cause almost every single hardship the Flash had ever had, including the passing of his own mom. In Flashpoint Reverse Flash, Flash, we actually get to see Eobard traveling into the past and trying to end the Flash, but since he can't do that because he'll create a paradox and he can't take out Iris West, who's Barry's girlfriend or lover, he just decides to go back to Barry's childhood and make Barry's younger days a literal nightmare. He makes the young Barry fall downstairs, he makes him miss catching a baseball, makes him drop all his books and his papers. Eobard even snatched away the one friend that Barry Allen had, erasing him from the time stream completely. It's not funny, but just remembering the look on Barry's face as this full-grown man dressed in yellow just ruins his life, it kinda cracks me up. I'm sorry. Now, have you ever wondered how DC Comics first got their multiverse? When Barry Allen was introduced in 1956 as a reinvention of the Flash, DC explained that in Barry's universe, the original Flash, who was Jay Garrick, and all of his adventures were actually the fictional exploits of a comic book superhero that Barry liked growing up. So, when Barry got powers, he took on the identity of that hero to honor him. This was eventually retconned in the iconic Flash of Two Worlds story from 1961's Flash number 123, where Barry accidentally found himself transported to Jay Garrick's world. He learned that Jay was in a different universe entirely called Earth 2, and that the comics written by Gardner Fox were actually dreams that Fox had remembered and written down. As Barry explained it, quote, "Obviously when the writer was asleep, his mind was tuned in on Jay's vibratory Earth," which is a weird sentence. Now this was a super weird way to incorporate Jay Garrick back into the real world, but it also had long-running effects on the larger DC universe because this is also the first introduction of the DC multiverse in order to explain all the Golden Age heroes and how they existed at the same time as all the new heroes, but then they created a whole other problem, which is why we got the Crisis on Infinite Earths in order to clear everything up, which it didn't even do. I don't want to get into that though, so we're gonna move on. Now this one is one that I'm not sure if everyone knows about. I think like half the fans know and the other half have no idea. Basically, when Wonder Woman first came on the scene, the character being tied up happened to an increasingly uncomfortable degree. This was because her co-creator, William Moulton Marston, incorporated his, preferences into her stories and powers. Like, infamously, he made Wonder Woman's greatest weakness being tied up or subdued by a man. This was pretty quickly retconned even before the Comics Code Authority cracked down on comics in the 50s. Later writers didn't share Marston's interests and views and felt that Wonder Woman's weird and oddly specific weaknesses were unnecessary, not only unnecessary, but just a tiny bit sexist and humiliating as well. This major DC retcon went unnoticed for actually a really long time until some dedicated readers dug into Wonder Woman's past. But speaking of that, Arthur Curry is Aquaman. He's the guy. When people think of the blonde-haired, golden fish scale wearing hero, they are thinking of Arthur Curry. Or are they? Ooh. Arthur Curry is DC's official Aquaman. That part isn't wrong, but when you look at the Golden Age Aquaman, that is actually not Arthur Curry. That version of the character, who looks basically the exact same, with all the same powers, is actually just some unnamed water-based hero who actually kind of despises us regular Earth humans and fought against the Axis powers during World War II. DC had only introduced Arthur during the Silver Age of comics, and he became accepted as just the guy who had always been Aquaman. As he got more and more popular, DC just kind of quietly swept Golden Age Aquaman under the rug and pretended that they were the same person the whole time. It's actually kind of hilarious because the only reason no one realized was because, I mean, it's Aquaman. No one cared. Now when it comes to the Green Lanterns, John Stewart is pretty universally known as the serious, disciplined one, and that is mainly to do with the fact that he is a retired US Marine. But despite his current gruff, serious, hard reputation, a lot of people forget that when John Stewart first came on the scene, he was actually a pretty rebellious dude who actually had a background as an architect. He was chosen by the Guardians specifically because he was rebellious. Hal Jordan at the time was the Green Lantern's super conservative, serious, main guy lantern, and they chose Stewart specifically to counter him. It wasn't until the animated series that John was finally introduced in the way that we actually know him today. Last but certainly not least today, I have decided to include what may just be the most hated retcon to grace the pages of the New 52 reboot, turning Lobo into Lamo. In Justice League 23.2 Lobo, it was revealed that the Lobo that we know, the big bike-riding, foul-mouthed, regenerating, Gene Simmons-looking space bounty hunter who pretty much every single comic book fan loved, was actually just an imposter. In actuality, a younger, short-haired, boring, generic as hell looking tiny little dude was actually the real, genuine Lobo. And to usher that change in, Lobo #1 gave us this new Lobo beheading the fan-loved version of the character and deactivating his healing factor. Needless to say, no one liked this version of Lobo, and if you did, I don't believe you and you're just saying that to be difficult. Thankfully, the original version of the character was restored to greatness and we can just forget this ever happened. Please. But that's all she wrote. Thank you guys so much for watching here on Top 10 Nerd. I'm Adam Andrews, and I'll catch you guys on the Flippy Flop. Until then, peace out, nerds!